Bom, perguntas podem ser feitas em português ou em inglês, tem tradução simultânea. Eu só peço que sejam feitas perguntas concisas. Paranhos, Elga, ali, Paranhos, primeiro.
First, I would like to hear from you the comments regarding that PPP was built, as far as we know, by U.S. and Japan exactly to face China. U.S. came out. I would like to hear your comments. What's your view on the TPP today? Secondly, I would like to hear from you that China announced this year, and many Brazilians are going, and many people in the world, for this show that we have at the end of the year in China. They say they are going to buy $10 trillion in the next 5 years, $2 trillion every year. What is your opinion about this, and if it's sincere, the situation?
$10 trillion of what?
$10 trillion China announced they are going to buy from the world, and they are making this big show now in November in China.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, many Brazilians are going for that.
Yeah.
And the third, also, I would like to hear your comments that the investments that China is doing all over the world, mainly in all these strategic countries like mainly Brazil and Africa. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take another one, and then Elga.
It's just a detail in this very broad picture of the world. It's about primary exports. We have at least, I don't know whether it's wishful thinking or a truth, but we have the belief that primary exports today are no longer what they were in the 40s, 50s, 60s. That primary exports are not really primary. They are agriculture, mineral, etc., but they have a lot of technology embodied. That it's no longer right to say, well, with a certain as a minor thing, that this is a very bad thing to export primary products. So that's about this, that the nature of primary exports in the 21st century. It would imply something about the Prebisch theory that has been demoralized in Latin America, but that's more complicated. But it has consequences for the idea of Prebisch.
Yeah.
One more. Last one. Okay.
You'll be brief, Professor, so you can answer the other ones too. About the Belt and Road Initiative, I was in an event today regarding China exports and mainly of capital to Latin America, and with the Brazilian imminence of coming to a new government that may not be completely aligned with China interests, do you feel that we could lose a good wave of Chinese investments in the country if our new government would not be aligned with China as we were in the past few years, or the relations between Brazil and China are too big to fail so far, and even with the speeches of China having an abusive relationship with the country, the new president would not have the power to end this relation so easy.
One last, really last one. No, wait for the microphone.
Could you speak a bit about science and technology in this broad picture?
About science and technology.
And technology. Is China indeed heading to become a technological superpower?
Okay.
Your turn.
Thanks for all the questions. With regards to TPP, well, I think that came at a very good timing because when the United States is trying to protectionism, the TPP started with 11 countries, headed by Japan. I'm proud of that. And I think it set a very high standard of liberalization, not only in trade, but other technology issues. So, yeah, what Japan can do to stop Trump or stop the United States from moving more towards protectionism is that we take the lead in trade liberalization. So not only TPP, but also Japan has signed a trade agreement with the European Union. So I hope that someday, well, both China and the United States will join the TPP so that we can have a very free, liberalized world. Secondly, with regards to the initiative of expanding imports by China, I think it's it came just at a good timing because China has a huge trade surplus. So definitely the country needs to import more to have a good balance with not only with the United States but all other countries in the world. So I think it may be too late for China to have such an event. The country could have started earlier of its import initiative. Perhaps based on Japanese experiences, China could consider having more international investment in other countries to make things there and well, send them back to China so that China can increase its imports. Third, investments. So I think, generally speaking, well, I think we should consider China have basically consisted of two parts, the state sector and the private sector. So it relates to the question from that gentleman over there. I think, well, with regards to the state sectors, state-owned enterprises investment, like I heard that the state grid is investing in Brazil, electricity transmission lines. Well, that sort of investment may be affected by political factors because state grid is a very important state-owned enterprise in China. But in the case of other investments like for example, car industries, I heard that several car makers in China have investments here in Brazil. They will not be affected so much by political factors because they are private, so they have their own strategies. So, or maybe that's something of a wishful thinking. I tend to think that China is a diversified countries. Well, but considering the case of Japan and China, that even applies to Japan and China because we have lots of various types of investments coming from China, and that are not affected so much by the political influence. And with regards to primary exports, well, maybe you are right. Perhaps primary goods export are involved with more technology, but still, I at least I can say that the defect of primary exports is that it lacks flexibility. So in a manufacturing country like China, they can switch to one export item like watches to another, like personal computers quite easily, because the workforce may which switch from this to that. The machinery are somewhat common, but it is very difficult for a primary exporter to switch from one to another when it comes, especially when it comes to mining. You cannot export copper instead of iron ore. Maybe it will be possible in agriculture. You can switch from soybeans to corn, but it takes at least 1 or 2 years to switch from this to that. So I think that is why the primary goods exporters are affected by the fluctuations of the importing countries. And I recently read Prevish again, and he's actually talking about the hardship of primary goods exporters when they are exposed to the trade fluctuations. I mean, the boom and bust cycle. So I think that the same thing still applies today. And the last question about science and technology. Yeah, that part is I'm the most optimistic about Chinese future, because China have many universities producing lots of graduates. I think it was triple the size of the United States. I mean, the number of new graduates from China. So, and a country like Huawei, they can just use these masters, doctors, every 10 years they can fire a lot of these masters, doctors, because there are many others wanting to come into. So that's I think they can use a lot of intelligence in a great volume. I think that's the greatest advantage of China.
We still have nós ainda temos tempo para só. Ele tem tradução simultânea aqui. Só espera o microfone.
Boa tarde. O senhor tinha falado que esperava que China e Estados Unidos entrassem na TPP para um mundo mais livre, um comércio mais livre. O Brasil está num bloco econômico de peso relativamente pequeno em relação a outros do mundo, principalmente se eles entrarem nessa TPP. Gostaria de saber, pela sua experiência de comércio exterior, qual seria a melhor estratégia do Brasil? Continuar nesse bloco mesmo ou tentar fazer uma área de livre comércio, retroagir para uma área de livre comércio, que seria agora uma evolução ao invés de uma involução, e tentar fazer acordos bilaterais com países grandes comercialmente como China e Estados Unidos, já que o Brasil praticamente hoje não tem acordo bilateral nenhum e o Mercosul só trava qualquer acordo por ser hoje em dia um mercado comum. Obrigado.
Mais uma aqui. Jair, na passagem aqui. Minuto aí. Jair.
Just one small question. You didn't speak about the environmental constraint that could force China to change its economic model.
Última pergunta aqui, ó. Tá bem.
I will do this question in English and in Portuguese. I'd like to know from China, is it possible for China to finance research abroad, such as Germany or France, to develop new technologies and apply production to itself and foreign countries such as Brazil, Peru, and Africa and otherwise?
Good. And Paranhos has also asked you to comment on Africa, on the investment of China in Africa.
So thank you again for all these questions. Well, the Brazilian free trade strategy. I'm not really in the position of giving any comments about Brazil, but I think for Brazil it is also, I can say that, at least I can say that having a greater market will be good for Brazil, especially for its manufacturing industry, because the size of the market is very important. So perhaps you can do more in South America, and in one day you can join the TPP. TPP, I don't think it's, at the moment it's, we lost United States, so it's become much smaller, but I think the idea would be, sounds attractive to Brazil, even to Brazil. And secondly, with regards to environmental constraints, yeah, of course, China definitely faces many environmental constraints. But I must say that I think there are quite positive improvements in its environment with regards to, for example, air. The air has been obviously improved compared to 2 or 3 years ago. But of course, China is the largest country having the largest CO2, carbon dioxide emissions. So that really is a big constraint for China. I think we hope that China will be more active in reducing its carbon dioxide emissions. So that, on the other hand, it will be a great constraint of its
Sorry, what about the supply of water? I think.
water.
Yeah.
Water. The water issue is mainly concerned with the internal imbalance. So while the southern part has many floods every year, and the northern part lacks water. So maybe China can solve part of the problem by they have already created a canal connecting the south and the north.
Would it create a problem with India?
India. India.
They are taking water from India.
I don't believe in that rumor. I know that there's a discussion in India about that, but I think that's if it's real, then it is a great problem. I don't think China is so foolish to do that. Okay, and research abroad. In fact, I know that Chinese companies like Huawei, for example, they already have research institutes around the world, and like Huawei have a research institute in Romania, Russia, because they think that Romanians, Eastern Europe and Russia are good at encryption. So it's quite definitely, it's possible. The Chinese companies are willing to have research institutes abroad, but maybe the problem would be on the host side. Like the United States, they're getting more and more anxious about leakage of technology, science and technology to China. So there may be more resistance, not only from the United States but other countries about such research, multinational research institutes. In Africa, I learned in South Africa that China is not only investing in mining but also in manufacturing. And so I think as I subscribe to Raoul Prebisch's thinking, I think China should not be the exploiter of mining resources. So China should be more active in investing in manufacturing so that these countries in Africa can have more manufacturing employment.
But is China doing that in Africa?
Yes, but still in only limited countries like South Africa and Ethiopia, but not in Congo, for example. So there should be more room for doing that. Yeah.
All right, if I may abuse my prerogative of being chairing this session, my question is, to put it in a funny way, how sinocentric China is. Because if you take the example of the United States after the Second World War, the United States was able to build an international order, which was, of course, the lion's share was the U.S. share, but it was a positive sum game. Is China playing the same game, or China is so sinocentric that China is not able to play this win-win game with other countries, especially in the neighborhood?
I think, it takes time for China to change its mindset of sinocentrism, and I do think they are. The ordinary people there are thinking in sinocentric ways. And another thing is that China is not ready to draw the rules of the global economy. So, because they are sinocentric thinking, so they are not ready to rule the world.
But for instance, if you take specific projects, for the way they are running the Belt and Road Initiative, are they developing win-win games with other countries or with other companies of different nationalities? And
at least the Chinese say so, but they have difficulties in persuading or making the others believe that it is a win-win game. So I think first of all, the Chinese approach to global economy until the moment is to go with the others' rule, like the IMF, the World, WTO, and in that way, we should be more, friendly to China. For example, letting China have a bigger share in the IMF, having bigger role in international institutions. If China starts to think about they have the right to write the rules, then it may be a big problem, because we are also not ready for China taking the lead in making rules.
Right, I saw someone raising.
I was wondering whether China would eventually learn how to play soft power towards other nations.
I think that's a big problem. Because China is trying to expand its soft power in its own way, but it's not creating good results. In my view, soft power is not something that you can create by your own wish. It is, it should be spontaneous. And the problem of China's culture and even its science is that it's too much government controlled. So the result is that it lacks attractiveness from other countries. So in that meaning, I don't think that China will be a big player or a big entity in its soft power.
So I think you think it would be fair to say that looking at the constraints, environment is one constraint, the decrease of population is another constraint, and the command economy is also another constraint. And because apparently China is, instead of liberalizing the economy, is concentrating power in the hands of one person.
Yeah. Well, I have a little bit more complicated view on Chinese economy because it is true that the center or Xi Jinping is trying to have a stronger grip of the economy on the one hand, but on the other hand, the private economy is out of control. And yesterday I went to the Liberdade here in São Paulo. I saw many shops run by, I think, Chinese merchants. I think that's a miniature of China. China has lots of places like that, and that sort of economy is creating the dynamic part of China, which the government cannot really control. So,
can this, just to close, can this be a source of soft power? I mean, the Chinese diaspora.
Yes.
Abroad.
Yeah. So I do think that China already have lots of soft power, including its culture, and also the merchants. But the problem is that the government want to control it or channel it to a single direction, and that makes its soft power less attractive, I would say.
All right, Professor Marukawa, thank you so much, and I hope to see you again in the near future here.
Thank you very much. Muito obrigado.